All right, well, it's been good, I think, to go through the book of Ecclesiastes. This is a regular Baptist Press Sunday school lesson, Life and Love, Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon. And so we're going to be going through Ecclesiastes on Wednesday nights. And this is a special book by Daniel Estes because 1995, I didn't use this exact copy of this book, but when I was in Grethel, Kentucky, I taught through this Sunday school lesson and it helped me in life. And I think as we have a lot of young people here, that perhaps it'll help them and us older folk as well to be reminded of the truths in Ecclesiastes. So Ecclesiastes chapter number 1, beginning at verse number 12, is where we're going to start tonight. There used to be a program called This Is Your Life. And on the program This Is Your Life, they would go through someone and what he had done and his accomplishments. And this guy here lays out, if King Solomon was on This Is Your Life, here is how he would be introduced. He built his dream house, complete with elaborate swimming pools. He designed and planted beautiful flower gardens and orchards. He achieved the highest education possible. He hired many servants. He was increased greatly in wealth. He acquired livestock. He engaged musicians for private concerts, and he had many girlfriends. And so this is Solomon, King Solomon. And so here's the response that they said that he would give to that introduction. Yes, I did all these things. I did them as part of an experiment. I wanted to discover if it's possible to find fulfillment and significance under the sun, that is, without considering God. As king, I had virtually unlimited power to do as I pleased. So I used all the advantages of my royal position, looking for meaning in life. For my first experiment, I tried to find fulfillment in human wisdom and pleasure. As king, I could learn anything I desired. However, the more I learned, the more I saw the meaninglessness of life. When it came to pleasure, I had unlimited resources, but I found the more I laughed, the more my laughter seemed shallow and phony. I tried it all, and I concluded that life is vanity and vexation of spirit. And so as we go to chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes, we're going to start at verse number 12, and we see an explanation here in verses 12 through 15. Verse number 12. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. In verse number 12, Solomon repeated the description of himself as a king of Israel. Now, we live in a country where even the president is supposed to be under the law. And so, we see a former president on trial right now. I didn't catch the results of that if they came out. But maybe when this president leaves office, he'll be on trial for something else. It seems it's kind of silly how it's all going about. But anyway, but the president even is under the law. We remember President Nixon. They went after him for Watergate, the scandal there, and he resigned, and President Ford had to pardon him, so he didn't have to go through the agony of a trial. But as a king of Israel, in ancient times, the king had unlimited power to do as he pleased. And so this power enabled Solomon to do something that we could not do. And that is, he could use all of his advantages that he had in life to look for the meaning of life. And so, verse number 13, and I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. So here Solomon is. He's the king. He can do pretty much whatever he wants. Of course, he's limited by the fact he's a human. But other than that, he's got all the wealth, all the wisdom, all the servants, anything he wants to do. And so in verse number 13, we see that his search for the meaning of life was intensive and exhaustive, and he scrutinized life in detail. But no matter how far he searched, he always came to the same disappointing conclusion, and it was this: God has given humanity a painful existence that involves much hard work. So, this is just the truth of the matter. God has given humanity a painful existence that involves much hard work. Arduous toil, as the writer here puts it. Verse 14. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So here's his conclusions here. He says, I've seen everything there is. I've experienced everything that I can experience. And it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. In all of his search, he found nothing that provided true fulfillment or satisfaction. The phrase that's used here, vexation of spirit, literally means shepherding the wind. In other words, you've heard the phrase of trying to rope the wind. Okay, the wind's blowing, I'm going to try to rope it. Whoops. Let me try it again. Whoops, I can't do that. It's because nothing's there. And that is Solomon's description of everything under heaven, everything under the sun, everything on this earth without God. He figures out that people are incapable of controlling the variables of life to produce a satisfying result. I've said this before, but if I went around the room, I said 20 years ago, would you see yourself being where you are today? I would say 90% would say no. I do not see myself being where I am today. And this is the truth that Solomon's dealing with. You do all this work and all this toil, and yet there are things in life that are out of your control that cause you to never be able to find fulfillment and satisfaction in this world. And so you're going to do one or two things. Either you're going to be depressed and anxious and worried and all of that sort of stuff, or you're going to end up doing what Solomon concludes in the end, and that is just trusting God with your life and living for Him, living for something outside of this world. So verse number 15, Solomon says, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. Without God, what happens in life is without meaning and beyond control. Many things are crooked, for they do not correspond to what is right and just. And the thing is, in and of ourselves, we are powerless to make them straight. Human intellect lacks the ability to answer the puzzles of life. People reach the end of their limited understanding, and they have to give up on trying to comprehend and understand life. So this is an explanation that Solomon gives here. And that is, trying to find meaning in life without God is like trying to rope the wind. There's just nothing there. And there's so many variables that it's out of control. And so he is going to conduct two experiments, one dealing with wisdom, whether or not you can find meaning in life through wisdom and knowledge, and the other one, pleasure, whether you can find meaning in life through pleasure and the things this world has to offer. Any comments about that introduction? All right, let's go on. Wisdom, verses 16 through 18. It says, I communed with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate, and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So once again, we see here, this is a perfect description of Solomon. He has more wisdom than anybody else who had been in Jerusalem before him. So Solomon was going to use his great wisdom and knowledge to find meaning in life. And so let's go on this journey with him. Verse 17. And I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. And what is vexation of spirit? It's trying to do what? Rope the wind. So Solomon gave himself wholeheartedly to this challenge. He searched the full range of human experience, from wisdom to madness to folly. And he scrutinized life to the max. He overlooked nothing. However, there was one conclusion in what Solomon found out. Let's look at Proverbs, which is also written by Solomon here. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. And this is what is missing in Solomon's search here. Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding." So here it is. The fear of the Lord, a proper view of God, is the beginning of wisdom. And so Solomon, in his experiment here, looked everywhere for wisdom except the right place, because true wisdom begins with God. And so, here he is saying here, he says, verse number 17, "And I gave my heart to know wisdom, to know madness and folly. I perceive this is also vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow." In much wisdom is much grief. This is what he learned. The more he learned in his search, the more he realized that life is dreadfully out of line. The best human understanding leads only to more pain and more sorrow. If Solomon were to find fulfillment, it would not come from human reasoning. The more he learned under the sun, it's like they say, the more you learn, the more education you get, the more you realize you do not know. And this is just a dead end for Solomon. Any thoughts about that? Yeah. Yeah, vanity of vanities is what he keeps saying. It's all empty. Everything in this world is emptiness. It's emptiness without God. That's exactly right. That's right. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Anything else? I think Jesus had it right when he said that, I know Jesus had it right, but he had it right when he said that we have to become like a little child in order to receive the kingdom of heaven. We're going through the book of Genesis right now in Sunday school. And listen, just believe what it says. Just believe what it says. That's all you have to do. Believe what the Bible says. And yet, you send your kids off to some college or something, and they get higher education in the things of this world, and they start to doubt. They start to question just the simple message of the Bible and the gospel. And that's what we see here. All of this learning that Solomon had, this earthly knowledge, does him absolutely no good without God at the foundation. And that's what he's realizing. Be as smart as you want, but that's not where the answers are. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
You said that the childlike faith, or to be like a child to enter heaven, is like having a childlike And it is, he was so excited. And he may not have had the knowledge typical for someone today, because he had a mind of a child. But yet he found so much joy in this simple thing.
Well, this is the thing that I think you're getting at, and that is, someone with a very low IQ who has, special needs, who just simply trusts the Lord Jesus Christ is a lot better off than someone with all the education in the world and the highest education, the highest IQ there is, who refuses to trust. And these people, you think about these college protesters all over the nation, they look miserable. They're just angry, miserable people. And the reason they're angry and they're so miserable is because there's no God in the picture. That God is working all things together for our good and for His glory. And so someone, like Norm, who had a simple way of looking at things, but who trusted God and who rejoiced in Christ and what Christ did for him, is a lot better off than someone even like Solomon if he doesn't look to God as the source of his trust and his wisdom. And you're absolutely right. Come as a child, childlike faith. This is what God receives. And all the smarts without God is worthless. It's worthless. Vanity. Rope in the wind. I'm going to learn that new fact. I'm going to get that new degree. And I'm going to be all happy. And I'm going to be fulfilled. And all of a sudden you're a doctor. And there's nothing there. And you realize you have to get up just like you did the day before. The same struggles. And most of all, the same sin. And you may not even know what the problem is in your life. But it's that sin that comes between you and Almighty God. Thank you for that reminder. That's good. That's what Solomon's getting at here. Without God, degrees and smarts of this world are just nothing. Anyone else? All right, well, the second thing in his experiment was pleasure. And that's in chapter number 2, pleasure. So it says here, after finding that human wisdom leads to disappointment, Solomon investigated the path of pleasure. As the king, he had the resources and freedom to do as he pleased. Therefore, he used every opportunity to satisfy every single nagging ache in his heart. Verse number 1. I said in my heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. He uses the word here, prove. He is going to prove. He is going to explore pleasure in a careful, scientific manner. I remember hearing a young man say this, who was part of our family, not my kids, and called him on his 21st birthday. Won't name his name. Y'all probably don't know him anyway. But anyway, and we said, what are you doing today? And he said, well, I'm slowly drinking this alcohol so I can experience all of the effects and stages of intoxication. That's, it's going to lead him down a wrong path. But what I'm saying is, this is the same way in which Solomon was exploring pleasure. And that is, it wasn't just a haphazard thing. Oh, look over there, there's this opportunity. Oh, look over there, it's this opportunity. But he was taking all of these different things that he had an opportunity to do, and he was seeing whether or not each of these things, in each of these categories, would give him some fulfillment in life. And so, verse number 2. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? See, pleasure is vanity. Even though it might produce some temporary laughter, it cannot yield lasting satisfaction in the life. I remember there's that song that came out some years ago, People Need the Lord. And it talks about those smiling faces and the laughter. But behind those smiling faces and that laughter, without God, it's vanity. It's all emptiness. It's all emptiness. Verse 3, I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under heaven all the days of their life. So Solomon attempted to hold on to both wisdom and pleasure. He had already found that wisdom leads to greater pain, and he knew that unbridled pleasure would quickly destroy a person. So he tried to see whether pleasure under the control of human wisdom could give him the fulfillment that he sought. He wanted to see if a person can truly enjoy his or her life without God. And this is how a lot of people enter into the pleasures of this world. Well, I'm just going to dabble in it. I'm just going to do it in moderation. I'm not going to ruin my life with it like most people do, or a lot of people do. I'm going to be the exception and not the rule. And so that's what Solomon is saying here. I'm going to engage in these pleasurable pursuits that this world offers, but I'm going to remain in control. And I'm just doing this as a scientific experiment to try to figure out where we can find the meaning of life. Okay, so verses 4 through 8, we see here that Solomon lists a sampling of the pleasures he sought. We won't read these. I'll just read kind of a summary here. He designed and constructed architectural masterpieces, houses, vineyards, gardens, orchards, and even pools. He collected household servants to maintain his grand scale of living. His holdings in cattle surpassed those of Saul and David, and he accumulated a vast amount of silver and gold. His palace was full of musicians and women. Solomon had arranged for the full range of his pleasures to be indulged. And if you look at 1 Kings chapter 6 through 10, you'll see that this matches up perfectly with who the historical books show Solomon to be. And so what was the result of it? Well, let's look at verse number 9. So I was great, and increased more than all they that were before me in Jerusalem, and my wisdom remained in me. And so Solomon was truly great by every common measure. He had surpassed all of his predecessors. Verse number 10. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. In other words, Solomon had accomplished many enjoyable things. His projects and possessions gave him some joy. But, we see in verse number 11, then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do. And behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Yes, Solomon says, all these things brought me pleasure. But yet when he stood back and he looked at his building projects and his pools and his servants going here and there, and he looked at his harem of women, and he, all of this stuff, what he realized is, it says here the word portion here, the word portion. And that is that his joy was only his portion. His effort cost more than the results he achieved. He could have pleasure, but it came at a very high price. And so he concluded that the search for satisfaction through pleasure was vanity and vexation of spirit. Remember the word profit here, as used here and also used today. Profit is net profit. You take your gains and you take your expenses. And when he compared the gains that he had with all of these pleasurable experiences, and he matched them up against the expenses and the efforts that he put out to have these pleasures, he realized that it was not a profitable enterprise. And so, in chapter 1, verse 3, Solomon asked the book's key question: what profit is left when we subtract life's efforts from life's accomplishments? And we find that pleasure without God yields absolutely no profit. So let's get to the evaluation. Solomon evaluated what he learned from his experiments. On wisdom, verse number 12. And I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which has already been done. Solomon surpassed what people with ordinary resources could attempt. His was a true test to determine once and for all if humans can be satisfied through their own efforts. It would be futile for anyone else to even try to find satisfaction in the things of this world if a man like Solomon could not. So here's the ultimate test case. King, wealthy, could do anything. If he can't find satisfaction in wisdom and in pleasure, then none of us stand a chance to find satisfaction in that. So verses 13 and 14. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happens to them all. I read this at our baccalaureate, and that is what Solomon realized is that wisdom is much better than foolishness, because the wise person has a little bit of insight about life, whereas the fool is walking in darkness. That's why it's important to go to school. That's why it's important to get an education. You learn how to read and write and do those things in order to manage your way through life. It's a good thing. If you want to go into a certain career, it's good to have some business skills, good to have some accounting skills, good to have some education skills or whatever it may be, some tools. However, Solomon had to admit this reality, and that is that it doesn't matter how much smartness you have. There's one thing that comes to everybody. And what is that one thing? Death. That's right. Death comes to everyone. Death is the great leveler of humans. No one, no matter how wise, is exempt from the grip of death. And so unless the issue of death can be surmounted, no amount of human wisdom can bring lasting fulfillment to a person's life. You gain all this wisdom, and then one day you're dead. You're gone. So, verses 15 through 17. Then said I in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me. For all is vanity and vexation of spirit. After death, the wise and foolish alike are forgotten. Wisdom required more work, but it yielded no more lasting benefit than foolishness. So here you got this guy. May not have the highest of IQs. Just enjoying life. Enjoying life. And then you got this guy that's put in all these hours and stayed up late and worked hard on all these degrees and has all this smarts. Stressed out all his life. He dies just like the fool. And so then the question becomes, who lived the better life? Because over time, you go to these colleges, and you'll see a building named after someone. Well, guess what? Probably in 50 or 75 years, there'll be a donor who gives more money than the person that building's named after. Or perhaps that person the building's named after falls out of favor. That happens. They just take that name off, slap another name on there. 50, 75 years later, they do the same thing. Students are walking around campus saying, who is, the Dobbins building. Who's Mr. Dobbins or Ms. Dobbins? We don't even know who that is. You work all your life, you get all this wisdom, you die, and nobody remembers you. And so Solomon comes to the conclusion, the bitter conclusion, that at this point he hated life. As Solomon viewed it, life is vanity and vexation of spirit. And so wisdom. You're going to die just like the fool. And all that brain stuff you got up there isn't going to do you any good when you die. And all that work and all that research and all that staying up late, if all you've got is this life, it doesn't do you a bit of good. Life without God is empty and meaningless. And that's true when it comes to education, as well as it is to other things as well. And we will find out his conclusions on pleasure at a later time.